We talked about coding, and again, some of this is kind of talking about it over and over again. Um, you've got this tons of information, and so you're trying to bring it into a place where you can understand it. So there are really three areas: concepts, properties, and dimensions. So concepts are ideas that emerge from the phenomenon being studied in raw, unanalyzed form. It's just like, oh, I see this, and I see this, and I think themes are I'll show you that are more categories, but concepts are very broad issues in the research. Then you have categories. Those are general groupings. And remember, I told you about faith, friendship, fellowship. Those were really categories in my study on a youth group. Dimensions are just the whole range of everything, the range of concepts, categories, properties. Now, properties are those little things that you really want to look for that give it substance, richness, and meaning that people may not be aware of. They may not be aware that in a youth group, friendship is a very big deal. It's a sense of belonging for youths that have meaning and purpose. So, they may not be aware of that. So you're making sure that you are sharing that when you're writing your report. How are you going to know it's trustworthy? We know with quantitative that we're making sure it's trustworthy all the way through. We're using very reliable and very valid instruments. We're using SBS, so it's trustworthy. Well, how do you know qualitative is trustworthy? You want to make sure that the representatives that you have in your study are representatives of your particular purpose that you are looking for. You check for researcher effects. Have I done something because of who I am? We are who we are, and sometimes we have to make sure we don't manipulate something. I tell my students all the time, when you are in counseling, you have to check and make sure that you're not trying to manipulate your client to meet your own personal needs. Triangulate findings. I told you all I was on some boards of review, and if they don't use more than one method of data finding and search, I'm not going to approve it. If they only do interviews, but they don't go out and they don't experience it, and they don't look for documents, they don't look for different types of data, that's not triangulating. You want to weigh the evidence. I love that in research. I think I've mentioned it, falsification. We spend as much time trying to prove we're wrong as we do prove we're right. Because if you can't prove you're wrong, well, that's really showing more and more that you're right. So you weigh the evidence, you check for outliers, but you would do that at any research. You follow up if there's any surprises. Is there something you found out and we really want to find those surprises. To me, that's when I go, oh, wow, this is great. I wasn't looking for this, but I found this out. You look for negative evidence, just like I talked about. You make if-then tests because you're always looking to make sure, well, if they had responded differently, if this had happened differently, would it have changed my outcome? You rule out spurious findings, that is, extraneous things that came up that you really didn't prepare for. You replicate a finding if you can. Again, I am not for doing pilot studies and doing it over again. And then, okay, I really want to prove this, so I'm going to go out and do another study on a youth group. And then check out rival explanations. You usually find that out in your related literature if there's a rival explanation. And then you want to get feedback from your informants. It is good to sit down with individuals and say, this is what I found. I mean, the people, your participants, and get feedback from them. I was watching a television show, and this politician had a writer writing his kind of life story. And, when he finished, the politician didn't like what he wrote at all. Was not happy with it. It was true, but he was not happy with it. So you want to get feedback from but I would get it all along. I wouldn't wait till the very end. I would be getting feedback all along from my participants to make sure I was on the right track. Okay, now this is, to me, very cool research. It's phenomenological research. And that means research within the person. That means within us. We want to look at the subjective experience of the individual, the subjective experience of the individual. And we want to find out just what makes this person tick. What is it that it motivates a person to be a politician? That would be a really interesting study. That would be, okay, what is it? Because, you're giving up a lot. What is it in you that moves you toward that? What makes a football player practice all his life because he loves that game? And so I would want to know what's in you for that. You focus on participants' perceptions of their experiences and their circumstances. The purpose of the research is to observe the interaction and dialogue between the person and the world. The thing about phenomenological research, it's very interactive. The researcher is a highly involved individual with this, and invites your individual that you're studying to be a part of the experience. When I am teaching students on phenomenological research, we always do an activity where we do a rather than. And so I get them moving around the room and say, I would rather win a $500 million award of some kind, or I would rather have true love. And so it's interesting how they move apart when I'm asking all these rather questions, because we're finding out things about them. And it's really funny. The students on one side will say, well, if I have $500 million, I can still find true love. So I'll take the $500 million and then I'll go find true love. And then the ones on this side, yes, but what if I didn't? The money won't really mean much to me if I don't. So we're kind of looking at the perceptions within the person. All right, some terminology about phenomenological research. And let me make sure I say this right. Lebenswelt is a German word meaning life world. It refers to a combination of feelings, thoughts, and self-awareness experienced by an individual at any given moment in time. So this is a terminology that has to do with this type of research. We are looking at the feelings, the thoughts, and the self-awareness of an individual concerning a certain issue. Bracketing. Now, this is a little different here in this research as it would be generally. An intentional process by the researcher to extract personal bias from the examination of the subject. Yes, I'm involved. I'm participating. I'm part of this. I'm trying to understand your self-awareness and your thoughts, but I want to make sure it's your thoughts and your feelings, and that I'm not manipulating that, not changing that. And the last thing, I love this word, it's essence. The essence of someone. I always get my students to say, okay, what does that mean to you? And I get a lot of different reaction to essence. It's the commonality of lived experiences as the researcher searches for similarities among the experiences of the participants of the study. If I said, what is the essence of someone? I think you would probably have a very descriptive word about someone in your life. What is their essence? It's their whole lived experiences. It's who they are as an individual and a person. And then we're going to talk about the characteristics of a good qualitative researcher, one that might be able to do phenomenological research. Awareness of your own worldview. Know who you are. I could spend days on this one slide because when I was in my PhD program, and I was an older person in the PhD program, so I was there with a lot of early 30-year-old people. I was amazed at they had no self-awareness. They really didn't know who they were. And you need to have self-awareness of who you are. The ability to enter the participant's worldview. The more you grow, the more you know who you are, the more you connect with God, the more you grow spiritually. It's amazing how you have the ability to enter another's worldview. I have found as you grow in that ability to connect, I can go in and sit down with a client and have immediate connection with that client. But it's because I practiced it. I've worked on it. Acknowledgement of the nonlinear nature of human experience. We all know human experience is up and down, high and low, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. We know it's nonlinear. And then the use of narratives and stories. I'm not a narrative researcher, but I love narrative stories. Freud said that stories and metaphors were the road to the unconscious. And I have used this over and over in counseling. Telling stories to clients, especially in trauma. And people go, wow, this really works. I don't know if your children watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. My children love that. But we like the original one, the first one, not the new ones. And they would learn so much from watching that movie about, you've got to be kind and you've got to be respectful. Nobody told them that. They just watched the story. My grandson came over one night and he had been having a lot of bad dreams. And so to spend the night, how grandchildren love to spend the night with their grandparents. And so before he went to bed, I told him a story. And I just made up the story about this little boat. It was so cool. And what the boat went through, and then how someone came along and took care of the boat, and everything turned out very well. And the boat began to just go out on the water, and the family was so enjoying the boat. And so the next morning he came downstairs and I said, "How'd you sleep?" He said, "I slept great, Grammy." He said, "I think it was that boat story." And I was thinking, yep, it probably was the boat story. But the use of narratives and stories can be used not only in qualitative research, but also in your interaction with your clients. You have to have a tolerance for ambiguity. That goes back to that flexibility. Because you go, "Oh, you told me this yesterday, and now you're telling me this." So you have to have a tolerance for ambiguity. You have to focus on process and content. And then you have to have empowerment as a goal. But now this, to me, is for any research or for any therapist. If you don't believe you have the whatever it takes to help that client, do you think they're going to believe? They're not. You're going to have to believe your own empowerment. So the last thing we're going to talk about, phenomenological research, is the data that you're going to collect. We talked about that a good bit. You're going to do interviews. You're going to do focus group interviews. You're going to do observations. And you're going to use artifacts and document review. So again, remember triangulation. You want a lot of different types of data so you can study that data. Oh, I think we have a few more. Okay. Data analysis and interpretation. We talked about bracketing and data analysis. Phenomenological reduction. That means you're looking for words or key statements that capture the meaning. That's a big word to say. You're looking for keywords. What is it about this person? They make certain statements often. It really tells a lot about them. Extraction of meaning units, themes, and data displays. And this is the last slide that we're going to be talking about. Credibility. 5 major techniques to promote the believability and assurance that conclusions make sense. Prolonged engagement and persistent observations. It is very difficult for me to believe you know what you're talking about when you've only spent a week studying this. That's the one thing that I've said about qualitative research. That's why most people don't do qualitative research when they're on their dissertation. Prolonged engagement. It's going to take you a while to do this. Triangulation, multiple data sources, transferability. You hope it's transferable. You're going to really try to make it transferable, but again, it's one of the limitations. Generalizability is one of those limitations, and you do the best you can with that. Dependability, that you can show that you've worked hard, you've talked to individuals, you used the right participants, you've done the things that prove that it's dependable in what you are saying. And then confirmability. Remember we talked about getting individuals, colleagues, other people to look at your work and see, do you analyze this the same way that I analyze it? So a lot of things with the different areas, all of them were qualitative, but we talked about different areas of qualitative research, which you may find very fascinating and really want to do that kind of research.